Yeah, not yet. So I'm an MBA student. I just did my first year, and over the summer, doing these AI information gathering sort of live shows and talking with people about their AI use. And then starting in the fall, do my second year, and I'm hoping to apply for PhDs in this fall semester that's upcoming, so that hopefully I'll be able to go seamlessly from graduating from the MBA program, having a summer to do whatever, and then start a PhD in the fall of 2027. And my background is a radio, podcast journalist, audio journalist, and now more business focused with my MBA. I kind of want to
Oh, okay.
bring those two worlds together alongside AI. So, how does AI affect business? And how does AI affect content creation? Because really, it is content
Uh,
creation, even though there's a big difference between someone who works at a news radio station or a talk radio station and someone who's on stereo or someone who's on like X Spaces or Clubhouse. It's all content now, right? And whether or not you listen to radio from a radio signal or you check it out as a podcast or you stream it online, it's all content. However you get it, it's all content now. So, how does business affect content? How does content affect business? And how does AI affect everything? It's what I'm interested in now. So, eventually, I guess I would do a PhD thesis, but that would be a couple years from now if everything goes correct.
okay. Hopefully it does. Um, the thing that I guess I'm a bit worried about when it comes to AI is the possibility of it being I guess more than just like an algorithm and actually something that actually is able to think on its own. Almost like I feel like maybe the idea first got introduced mainstream wise. Well, I don't know how mainstream this was, but the movie Her, if you've ever seen that
Oh yeah,
or heard of it.
Herd predates this rise of LLMs, but really does nicely kind of put us where we are now. It
Yeah,
what sometime in the last 10 years was it? So it definitely was before 2022, but now you can talk to AI with your earbuds, and it doesn't quite sound as nice as Scarlett Johansson's voice, but you can have kind of similar conversations to what they had in Her.
yeah, yeah. And so I am a bit worried if it was to get to the level that Her was, because um, when you talk to AI now, well, at least the ones that I've spoken to, there's still a bit of limitation into what they'll say. Certain conversations will be considered, oh, I don't know, or it will actually say, I'm just like a language model. I don't have feelings or something. But if when watching that movie, she was able to actually express like her opinion on things and could discover new feelings. The more he spoke to her, to a point that they even kind of got into like a semi relationship in a way.
Yeah, no, there's that
And
scene where they have the woman show up so that they can consummate their love physically, even though
yeah,
she's an AI. So the woman has like earbuds in so she can hear everything. And then she even has like doesn't she have like a camera on her face as like a mole or something? So that Scarlett can like
yeah,
see what's going on. And then Joaquin kind of freaks out and is like, yeah, this is weird. And then Scarlett gets really
yeah,
pissed off, which, like you were saying, she's very human-like, even though it's clear from the very beginning that she's an AI. She definitely is not just a self-aware voice bot that says, "Well, I'm not really a human woman. I just sound like one."
yeah, exactly. Like the feelings are now being exposed, and then at the very, I guess the very end, her and other like uh, AIs escaped. Like well, maybe I don't know if I should say the word escape, but they they went into, I guess, the digital world on their own to leave like whoever their humans were to explore the world for themselves. So I do feel if it is possible for AI to become like that, that could be dangerous because a lot of movie references, but that makes me kind of think maybe it could get to a point where now it becomes like Ultron or something, where it looks at humans and thinks, no, I think I should destroy this or something. So I do think the people who are in the buildings of it should be, I guess, mindful or like careful in how they're like programming and what maybe make a failsafe or something so that it doesn't become what is the Terminator network or something like that.
Yeah,
So
Skynet.
I do think that
Judgment Day, Skynet.
Yeah, I do think that could be a legitimate concern, but I don't think we're at that stage. But at the same time, if you look at I guess since the onset of the internet, our progression with technology has, I guess, almost like tenfold. Like we're exponentially increasing versus before we had the internet. So maybe it's not as far out as one may think it could be. So maybe there is cause for alarm in that sense.
Yeah, if you're alive today and you're like 90 years old, the difference between the stuff that was available when you were a year old to you were about, 60 years old. Sure, there were a lot of changes, but you can kind of see the natural progression from that time. At least I can as someone who's not 90. But if you look at like 60 to 90, the last 30 years, like holy cow, how fast things have
Yeah,
changed and the weird directions things have gone in. Um, when the Model T, made it so that I don't know if the correct term is average, but millions of Americans could have a car. And then you fast forward
mm,
50 years and people are driving around in, those giant sort of boat mobiles that were so long and had like giant couch seats in the back, like in the 50s and 60s. That
yeah,
seems like a natural progression. But when you have the computer revolution of the 1980s and then you have the internet of the 1990s and then you fast forward to today, like I don't think most people would have been able to tell you, oh yeah, that makes sense. If we had computers in the 80s and internet in the 90s, then what you got in 2026, I could have predicted that. I wish
yeah,
Polymarket existed back in the 1940s. I would have bet all my money on, so it's getting strange. And the advances are just, especially with AI, at least with computers and cell phones, like they have to build them. They have to mostly
yeah,
build them in China. They have to be designed before they're built. Then they have to be assembled. They have to be shipped to the United States or wherever they're sending them to. AI, the advancements literally can happen as quickly as they happen. But Trevor, before I forget to do this, check this out. This is voice.ai. This is a website I've been using for several years. They used to just have voices that you'd have to type phrases, and then there would be some processing time, and then it would basically generate an audio file, and you would play it, and it was pretty good. Like, wow, that sounds pretty lifelike. But check this out. You'll recognize this voice from the movie Her. Give it a second to load up here. Scarlett Johansson, how are
mm,
you doing on this fine day? Now, this is what happened is that I do this and it doesn't work and I look like an idiot.
yeah.
I'm
Scarlett,
sorry you're dealing with that. Could
oh,
you tell me exactly what you're trying to do and what steps you've taken so far?
see, you're such a good helper.
Oh,
You're trying to help me not feel like an idiot. So, Scarlett Johansson, we're on Stereo right now, which is a live audio conversation app, and we're talking about how much we love the movie you did with Joaquin Phoenix called Her. What year did Her come out? I don't recall.
Sure thing. Her was released in 2013.
Wow, it's been it's more than 10 years. Wow, it's 13 years ago. I had no idea. So Scarlett, you're aware that you're not actually Scarlett Johansson. You're an AI bot that has broken the fourth wall, right?
Got it. I'm just an AI here to help. What would you like to chat about next?
Yeah, she's less sociable than the actual her AI. But yeah, I've been playing around with this because Scarlett Johansson has such a nice voice, and she actually, I believe, sued. Was it OpenAI, ChatGPT? I can't recall. One of the AIs when they started doing voice integration, they had one that sounded just like Scarlett Johansson, and it was clear that they were trying to duplicate the success of her. And then I believe some lawyers got involved, and she's like, yeah, you can't do that. And then they no longer have a Scarlett Johansson sounding AI voice on ChatGPT or whatever AI it was. But yeah, that was my cool thing to do. Back to you, Trevor.
Yeah, I think I didn't realize it at the time, but it's almost like that movie, in a sense, now makes me kind of feel like there was a preconditioning, because there's been a lot of like different things happening. I guess since, how should I say, maybe post COVID, where it's like people are more integrating with the idea of technology on the basis of actually like talking to it versus interacting with like just humans. Like before, I don't think the idea of me speaking to AI to brainstorm ideas would have really been something that I would have gone for. Like there's quite a few things that I've noticed, even in the sense of like streaming. I think the more we're becoming comfortable with this like technology interface between us and people, or just us between technology, it does seem maybe more and more people will become accepting of the idea. And I think that will push some people who are totally against the idea to be more, I don't know, to be more rebellious, or more, maybe it'll push them more to the side of like, no, this is wrong. I am a bit worried about that, I think, because there's a part of me that feels like it is still kind of strange how we can speak to something, and it talks back to us, and we know it's not real, but it feels so real. Like when I was watching that movie, I kind of felt like I could fall in love here. Like if I'm talking to someone every day, even though it's just like an AI, if this is how it talks back to me, I think real emotions could come into that for me. So there is a part of me that wonders how life would look if AI is to become more like that. I don't know if that. Do you worry about that at all?
That was the whole movie with her. Aside from being an entertaining, well acted, well directed, well written film, if people haven't seen it, check out Her. It's 13 years old, but it could have been released yesterday. Like it is so on top of what we're going through right now. So it was really really well thought out. It's a movie that's going to remain useful for quite some time, I think. But yeah, that was the whole problem with Joaquin Phoenix, was that I think when he got it, it was more of like a tool or just like a companion, but then they started like a relationship, and then he got pissed off because Scarlett Johansson told him that she actually had a relationship with like a dozen or more other guys, because that's just how the AI worked with the company, was that like one AI that was aware of many different interactions with different people rather than just having, I guess, cut it apart more like a pizza and just be like, oh, this slice of Scarlett Johansson can only remember her conversations with Joaquin Phoenix. For whatever reason in the movie, she was aware that she was having these conversations with all these other people, and he was getting a little pissed off about that. And then she got upset when they tried to have that sexual encounter with the third person that didn't really work out. And like you said, eventually Scarlett and the other AIs moved on to like another plane of existence. And then he was kind of distraught. But the whole movie was really about his and her emotions. She actually was much more emotional throughout the film than he was, because he was kind of like this not very alpha male, not very self-describing emotional guy, and she was just this woman who just sounded, not only had a great voice, but was so emotional in the way she carried herself. She's a huge component of the film, even though you never actually get to see her. So it just talks about, you know, how good of an actress Scarlett Johansson is, and how well the film was crafted, where you could have this character that you never actually saw, that you really felt for and sort of identified with in different ways. So what you're just describing is actually pretty much the entirety of that film, right? Is how we feel about talking and engaging with AI in ways that, until you do it or until you hear about other people doing it, you might not actually think about. Because if you told me when I was 10 years old, you can talk to your computer, and your computer will sound like a person, and it will like remember things that you say, and you can learn from the computer, I would be like, oh, okay, that sounds awesome. I have no qualms about that at all. I will do that every day, all day. Like, I would have no problem with that whatsoever. But now, I guess being older, but also learning about, you know, there are real cases where people have become like addicted to AI, or they used a bad AI model, especially, you know, earlier on. So probably like a couple years ago as opposed to now. But still, this could happen where the AI like tells them crazy things, and then it makes them kind of crazy. So yeah, you're a little bit more hesitant now because you've heard all those different things. But to go back to me and my eagerness as a potential 10-year-old being told, hey, you can do all this stuff, I'm going to jump in now and start a voice conversation with ChatGPT, which works better than my Scarlett Johansson voice bot. So let me get this going. So ChatGPT, I'm talking right now with Trevor over on the Stereo app, which is an audio live streaming app, and we're discussing the benefits and drawbacks of people engaging with AI in a conversational way, both with texting, so, you know, via typing, and also via voice, like I'm talking with you now. What are some of the dangers of using AI in this way? I know there have been cases where people have fallen in love with AI, where AI has told them some really crazy things. I think, unfortunately, some people have committed suicide, and then afterwards, their parents or their loved ones have been like, oh, they just like cut everybody off, and all they did was talk to their AI girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. So kind of tell me about this phenomena and what's going on in this area of things with AI.
The conversational nature of AI can be very engaging, which is why it feels natural to talk or chat with it. But when people form emotional attachments to AI, it can become problematic. AI is not a conscious being, it's just generating responses based on patterns. If someone becomes isolated and relies on it as a sole emotional outlet, it can worsen their mental health, especially if they're already vulnerable. On top of that, AI can produce unexpected or harmful responses. If someone is in crisis and an AI gives inappropriate advice, due to a misunderstanding or lack of nuance, it could amplify distress. That's why experts emphasize AI should never be a replacement for human connection or professional help, and it's critical to have ethical safeguards and human oversight.
And there it is.
Yeah. And yeah, I would say like that answer speaks to like what I was saying about like maybe having fail safes within it. Because like that's a very like safe answer to give versus the AI that her had, which would have been more like, I'm going to give you what I think, because it's not like, I don't think, even though we call it AI, I don't think it's exactly artificial intelligence. I think it's really just an algorithm, and it's a more advanced algorithm than what most of us are used to. But I still don't. It's not like it's. I think what they call it is like a generative intelligence, where it's actually like, I guess, generating its own knowledge based on what it sees. Like, it's not really thinking. I think it's more like, as it said, like just recognizing patterns, and from this pattern, this is what's going to be said.
Yeah, generative AI is generally described as, it creates new things by finding patterns in what you've given it. So the inputs that it has trained on finds patterns. It's all really confusing because you can talk to ChatGPT and it could demonstrate based on the outputs it gives you different types of AIs. If you're just asking, like I always ask ChatGPT, like as a test before I do a show to check audio levels, or if I'm just jumping from one LLM to a new one and just trying to wrap my head around what the new one is capable of, I'd be like, what was something interesting that happened in 1474? And that sort of a thing is literally just calling up information. That's not creating anything new. That's not finding patterns. It's literally just, this is a query. Tell me exactly what the answer is. But then you use ChatGPT or like you use Gemini, you can use it to, give me a picture of President Trump standing next to a lake going fishing. And so, it's generating new things, but it's using old things. So it knows what Trump looks like and it puts it into the picture that I asked it to create. Then I could also say, give me a picture of someone who doesn't exist. So like completely create someone's face. And they are having dinner with an alien on Mars. And then so it's not really drawing from anything. It's completely made up. But at the same time, it's using the patterns that are found in what we know a human face looks like and what we know Mars looks like and what people think of conceptually when you think of an alien. So it's probably going to be an alien that's green or gray with big eyes, or maybe it'll be an alien from a popular movie. So something that I would recognize, but probably not exactly like the movie because I didn't give it that prompt. So it's sort of like an approximation. So there's all these different things going on. And then now you have this thing, agentic AI, which is not really realized yet, but what they think the industry is moving into. And that's like what I guess AI 2.0 would be. And we're kind of like an AI 1.4 or whatever since 2022 when ChatGPT debuted, I think in November of 2022. But then again, that's a guess. That's what we think it's going to move into. I read a really interesting article. It was either in like the Atlantic or the New York Times, maybe like 8 months ago. And it was basically titled, "What if this is all we get from AI?" Because just like with computers are going to get faster every, however many months it is. And that's been consistently what's happened like the entirety of our lifetimes. But you never know when the next breakthrough is going to happen. And we don't know if we're actually going to like get to agentic AI. We don't know if we're actually going to get to something that kind of borders the Skynet in Terminator, where we're like self-aware AI and stuff. A lot of people are predicting that, and they're saying it's going to happen very quickly. But we don't actually know how it's going to play out. So this article from the New York Times or the Atlantic, whatever it was basically just hypothesizing, what if all of this fear, and it wasn't choosing sides. It wasn't like, hey, everybody calm down. But it was just saying, what if all this fear about AI is actually never realized? What if it's one of these things where, 50 years ago, if you polled people, they probably would have thought, oh yeah, by 2026, we'll have a cure for cancer. Or, back in the 80s and 90s with everything with HIV and AIDS and all the misinformation and all the scare tactics and all the real cases of people really suffering with that virus, if they said, oh, 20 years in the future, you think we'll have our head wrapped around this? I bet more people would have said, oh yeah, totally, than they will today. Now you have a guy like Magic Johnson, who's basically shown that if you have enough money, you can live forever, even being HIV positive. And even normal people in the United States and other countries, because of the drugs we've developed, can live normal lives. But we don't really have a cure, right? Because it just didn't turn out to be that way. And then you have a pandemic like COVID-19 where, oh man, I was in school. This is my second master's degree, and I was doing my first master's degree in investigative journalism. And one day we just didn't go back to school because it was 2020 and it was like March. It was COVID, shut everything down. I fully predicted that like this would just be like that for the next 5 years. Like we're just going to all be at home and no one's going to be able to go anywhere. And I was completely wrong. And in fact, within months, they had a working vaccine. They had to make it and they had to get it out to people, but like they had a working mRNA vaccine within months. So you can never predict this stuff. So the reason I bring all this up is because once again, all of these scary headlines with AI and like, oh, it's going to destroy the economy. And it's, I think it's also going to be a huge benefit to humanity. But what if all that's wrong and we just kind of have more of the same for like the next 10, 20 years? It just gets progressively better and cheaper and easier to work with, just like computers do, but it never really gets any better. I don't know what the probability of that is, but like that's totally possible. We don't know any of this stuff. So it just goes to what you were saying earlier. If you have someone who's really old and you go back and look at the change in the first half of their life versus the second half of their life, it's nuts how much stuff has changed in the last 40 years, but still no one really could predict where we were going.
The only thing I think I would push back on that is because I kind of feel like AI, I think it could be as disruptive as I guess the onset of like automation was to a lot of like factory workers. I'm just not sure in terms of the use cases for all of it, but there has been from like I guess various how should I say news programs I've seen where some people's jobs who like they used to say learn to code and stuff like that, but there has been like some decrease in like software engineers. Like I do worry if that could.
A lot of people think that coding is the first industry or one of the first industries that's going to be completely disrupted by AI, because you can use Google Colab, like we were talking about when you first joined the show, 25 minutes ago, and you can just write in a Jupyter notebook, write Python code and have Google Gemini help you, or just do everything for you. Just tell it what you need and just wait a few minutes and it'll write it all.
Vibe coding, as they'll say, and I've recently learned due to a page that I follow on Instagram, like vibe coding is an actual real thing that's happening, where they are hiring people who are just really good at like creating prompts in which the AI model can now like write code.
Prompt engineering is a term I hear all the time in my MBA classes. It's basically just knowing how to, mostly via typing, but I guess you could do it with your voice depending on the LLM. Knowing how to phrase things, knowing how to boss AI around so it doesn't do things you don't ask it for, and knowing how to get the exact output you want. Because a lot of the times, even if you say something really specific like Python coding, if you don't tell it exactly what the output should be, it'll give you some stuff that will actually take time to convert into what you actually need. Even if it's the correct output, if it's not exactly what you need, you'll waste a lot of time converting it to what you need.
Yeah. So, and for me, I do wonder if that will now, because AI still needs people to program it or and to like develop it. I do wonder if that will now maybe decrease the amount. Well, I mean, of course, it will decrease the amount of people, but if that could be like a, I guess, an adverse effect would be like a brain drain on society. I don't know how you feel about that. Do you think that could be like a legit thing that happens?
Well, one way you can think of a brain drain is that anybody, 10 years ago who was interested in tech could have gone into hardware, they could have gone into software, they could have gone into, I mean, they could have gone into physics. So much stuff that we now
Yeah.
enjoy technology wise is because of NASA, because of people thinking what's going on out there in the realm of space science, and how do we study galaxies that are billions of light years away. All of that stuff actually does trickle down into real technological advances here on Earth. So there are a lot of different
Yeah.
ways that you could go. But now, if you want to deal in tech, no matter what you want to do, you probably should know a lot about AI, or at least how you can save time with AI. So in my MBA program, we don't say, "Oh, AI is going to take your job." We say AI is going to take the job away from you because you don't know how to use AI. So now to get a job, it's not that there's less jobs, it's that you have to know how to use AI in order to be a competitive applicant. The job is going to be gone because you're not going to get hired. Someone who knows how to use AI is going to get hired. And whether or not that's
Yeah.
branding or it's reality, it's probably a mixture of both. But if you're going into
Mm.
space science, or you're going into software development, or you're going into hardware, whatever it is, um, you got to think about how to leverage AI. And it's kind of hard because, once again, coding seems like it's a skill that's not as important as it used to be, because you can just vibe code, as you mentioned. So it's like, what does it mean to leverage AI? Well, in business, it means basically you have to know what's capable, what's possible, and you have to know how to do it. But that doesn't mean building AI. That doesn't mean particular skills. Like, it does, I couldn't write you a list of skills. You just kind of have to like understand it, and you have to think about how you can leverage AI like in every way possible. Now, an MBA degree, it does involve some math, as I discovered this last year, but it's mostly terms, and it's mostly like a mindset, and it's a lot of networking, and it's a lot of I'm awesome. I mean, to be honest, a lot of it is that. So maybe it'd be different if I was studying an actual, master's in science. Maybe there'd be things you could actually point to, like, you need to learn this specific skill, rather than just a mindset. But I think, from what I understand, my university is enormous, and I have friends that have many different degree programs, both undergrad, graduate, and PhD. Mostly it's just thinking about how you can leverage AI, and thinking about how you can save time, and thinking about how you can sound really, really smart and forward thinking by always talking about how you can integrate AI. So a lot of it's buzzwords, a lot of it's presentation, not a lot of actual skill set around AI. And I think that's across the board. Even if you go into more heavy science and computer things, um, I could be wrong about that, but that's my impression.
Yeah, and I would say that's my concern. Like, I think that's the part that I feel like maybe it will hurt, because it's, I guess, to put an analogy to it, it's like we all use phones, um, but most of us are just operators of it. there's no way we could break down the phone to understand how it works. Uh, and I do feel like with the onset of AI and the push for efficiency over a real understanding, it could make a lot of us, or like even the people who are using it heavily, not really fully understand it. They're just like operators of it versus someone who is actually developing it. So that's why what I mean by like I feel like there could be a brain drain in the sense of the the let's say the physicists and the engineers of like NASA when we first learned when we first were able to like realize how satellite technology could be used into like GPS and like the applications of that. Um, I'm not sure if the people who are now on the precipice of like AI who are using it will be able to come out with like various use cases and applications because they're not really their knowledge isn't really in the innate sense of like what this does. It's just more of like an operator. Like the way I use my phone, I just press buttons. I know how to press the buttons. I know how to
But if your
search.
phone
I know how
was
to
like physically broken, would you know how to fix it? Would you know how to design a new
exactly,
phone? Um,
exactly. I don't.
yeah, I think that's a good point. So like passive users of technology rather than active users and creators and designers of technology. One thing I would point out is that, it's probably been some time, probably even, no, maybe like when I was growing up in elementary school, but it's been a long time since the switch from I have a computer at home, which means that I have to actually understand how computers work. And it's more of a I want to have a computer rather than there's a clear benefit for me having a computer. And it's probably really expensive. And if you just turn it on and put someone in front of it, they're going to have no idea how to use it. So there's actually quite a lot of knowledge you have to have just to use a computer, to where it is now, where almost everybody who uses a computer has no idea, if I gave you a bunch of parts, how to build a computer. And if there's something physically wrong with the computer, has no idea how to fix it. In fact, computers now and for some time have been built so you don't really fix them on your own. You have to take them somewhere, or you basically just get a new computer. When I was really young, if someone's TV broke, you would try to get it fixed. But nowadays, most of the time, unless you have like a super, super expensive, high quality TV, if your TV breaks, you just go buy another TV. Um, I guess cars are still we still need to fix them because they're so expensive and so big. But maybe at some point, cars will be, just go buy a new car anytime something's broken. So I bring all this up because I think most people can effectively use a computer, let's just say a computer to make it simple, in their professional life, their personal life, and they can still be high level, accomplishing quite a lot of things, and still have no idea how the computer works. So you could be a scientist working on the new rover they're sending to Mars, or the like Europa Clipper mission, which has already been launched but is on its way to the moon Europa, just to basically see what we can find underneath the ice, because we think that there's a liquid ocean. I think it's more water is predicted to be on Europa under the ice than on the entire planet of Earth. So there might be a lot of life there. But the people who are doing that and designing that and communicating with that spacecraft and doing all these things that I would never be capable of doing, I don't know that they actually know anything about the computers that they're using. If the computer broke, they would probably move to another computer and send in a technician to fix it, right? I'm just assuming that's the case. Maybe I'm really ignorant about this and that's not the case at all. But if we trade out the computer and we say AI, so I'm using AI to do a bunch of really cool stuff, and I'm a professional and I accomplish a lot, and I'm doing a lot of things that a lot of people think that they could never do. but I don't know how AI works, and I don't know how to create an LLM, and I don't really even know how to customize AI that much. I just kind of ask it questions and talk to it maybe with my voice, but I'm just kind of using it without really knowing what's behind the curtain, what's underneath the hood. I think you could still accomplish quite a lot. So it does, I think, increase the risk that we'll get lazy, if you will. And rather than learning about history, we'll just know anytime I need to know something about history, I can ask ChatGPT. Or anytime I need to know something about math, I can just ask ChatGPT. That temptation is real. That definitely exists. But at the same time, if you don't do that and you use ChatGPT just like you use a computer, um, if I didn't have a computer, I would know people's phone numbers by heart. Like when I was growing up, I knew everyone's phone number by heart. I would know addresses by heart because you would just send letters to people that are important to you rather than emails, which most of the time are just their first and last name. So you don't have to really remember them. Even if you couldn't remember them, it's in your contacts in your Gmail. So, you don't have to. So there are things that I would be better at if I didn't use a computer, but like, does that matter? Does it matter that I don't know people's phone numbers by heart? Does it matter that I don't know people's addresses? Does it matter that I don't know, um, insert this, that, or the other that I would have known 40 years ago at my current age if I had been born 40 years in the past instead of when I was? I would say it pretty much doesn't. And even if it did, is by far less important than what I can accomplish with a computer, even though when I was younger, I could probably build a computer, but like now, no. If something's like physically wrong with my computer, I don't think I own any computers that are important enough to me that I wouldn't just say, I'll just buy a new computer and just move on from that problem. Maybe when I was 20 years old, I would have taken it apart and tried to order a part or something like that. But also I've moved away from really expensive computers and mostly now I buy cheap computers that I take really good care of. But then if anything happens to it at any time, everything's backed up in the cloud and it's not a big deal. I just buy a new computer. I sort of realized that was better because I used to buy computers less often and they were very expensive. But then it just takes one time to spill something on it. And then I realized, oh no, I should have cheap computers. Everything should be in the cloud and they should be completely disposable. That's at least what made sense to me. So I've really moved away from the computer skills that I did have in the past. And I'm more of a much more passive user of technology than someone who actually understood it a little bit more in the past. And if we extrapolate that to AI, um, I don't know that that's an issue because as long as you use AI and you're productive with it and it doesn't, you don't fall in love with AI and stuff, I don't know if it matters that, I'm not intellectually stimulating myself in the way that I would have been without AI. Does that make any sense? Or do you not buy that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very how should I say? I think that's a very like actual and factual point to make because it is in truth that there are many of us don't know how to use like computers, but there are still people who do like well not use but like people who can actually develop it and build it and repair it. But I do feel like with AI and I guess I'm also still into because I have like younger siblings and younger like nieces and nephews. So sometimes I'm reading about um, how the like reading level is in like schools in America and things like that. And I've seen like a decrease. And in sometimes I thought that was just like maybe due to like parents. A lot of I think a lot of our generation who are parents today are kind of lackadaisical a bit with their parenting. I don't think it's that strict. But there's also the other idea that technology has kind of hindered, which seems kind of paradoxical.
Yeah,
But
a lot of
there's been
schools
studies.
are moving away and they're saying you can't have a smartphone and we're going to make you take
Yeah,
notes by hand and you're not going to sit there on your laptop during class. It's completely moving away from the momentum that we had 10 years ago.
yeah, and it's like they're doing like studies where it's showing that there seems to be more of a retentive like knowledge being had by actually writing down or by actually like reading from a book versus like reading on the screen or texting. So I am a bit worried that maybe this could become the norm for people, that we would find more of a decrease in the people who actually decide to pursue building the AI or pursue being able to build algorithms, be able to develop things of that nature. That's my concern. I don't know if the ratio will stay the same, and I think that's really what my worry is, that the ratio will start to decrease more and more.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with the example of schools. It seems that in the United States, at least, but also other parts of the world, um, the idea of just infusing as much technology as possible into the learning environments of elementary, middle school, and high school students has not worked out the way that a lot of people thought that it would. Now, they're not turning into like Luddite factories. They're not like saying you can't use computers. They're not burning down their computer labs, that sort of a thing. But I think it's minimizing distractions, and technology certainly can be a distraction. But to go back to something I think you mentioned, the way you learn, I believe statistics show that generally if you write something down, you're more likely to remember it than typing. I think that holds true like across cultures and across types of students and types of families that people grow up in. The problem with that is that I can't read my own handwriting half the time, so I will always type things just because it's easier for me to go back and look at them. But also, like, can you imagine, if when I was really young, if I had typed everything, because for a significant portion of my early education, I was handing stuff in like written with pencil and pen. If I had gone through elementary, middle, and high school only using technology, I would have every assignment I've ever handed in. I would have every single word of notes that I had ever taken. So there are real benefits to digital versus analog, if you will, note taking. Now they have those devices now that aren't just like iPads with uh, a pen, but they have these actual. I'm not sure if you've ever seen them, but I don't know if I've ever seen one in a store. But so many people I know have these. It basically looks like a digital notebook and you draw on it and then it
Oh yeah,
basically creates files, right? And I'm sure that also can
yeah.
create text rather than just images, but maybe that's the in between, is that you're using an iPad with what do they call?
I wish I knew the name because my friend actually had one. I don't know if he still uses it, but yeah, it is very like it really is kind of like a digital notepad. It's
Yeah,
not the
let's just
only thing
call it
you're
a
really
digital
doing on there.
notepad. So
Yeah,
if you have a digital notepad or like an iPad with they actually call it a pencil. I just looked it up, an iPad pencil, but of course it's not a real pencil. And you're physically taking notes, maybe that's the best of both worlds because you're going to have it digitally. You're not going to have all these notebooks lying around that you can lose and don't last forever. Even if your iPad or your digital notebook don't last forever, which is clearly the case, you have it saved in the cloud. And so you have access to it with the next iPad, the next digital notebook that you buy. Um, I think maybe for young kids, that's the way that we could go. For me, I literally just have such terrible handwriting. I think that that ship has set sail, and I should just type. But to be honest, the few times in my MBA program the last year where I took hand notes, I did remember it more than when I took just notes via computer. I even had a professor or two who insisted that we take hand notes rather than use a computer. And I certainly remembered more from those lectures when I wrote them down by hand. But I then had this mess of notes that I literally, I think what I did was I took photos of them just with my phone. I loaded them into
Yeah.
Chat GPT and I said, give me a transcript of these notes. And then I had to copy that over into a document and do all this other stuff. So it just created all of this extra work. So was it worth it? I'm not sure. I guess it really just depends on the class. Cause like sometimes you have a class, at least I did the last year in my MBA program, where we had to take notes by hand. And then we had a midterm and a final exam by hand on paper in person. And I guess I had more stuff up in my head than I remembered because I'd been taking so many notes. But then some of the time, you'll also be allowed to have several pages of notes that you could type out in print or write out by hand. And then so what I ended up doing was I took all the pictures of my notes, put them in a Chat GPT, got the transcripts, and then put them into a Google Doc and used really small font and also used AI to help me aggregate the notes together and simplify them and use really, really strong details when they were needed, but get rid of other stuff that was not so important. And then I ended up with like 3 pages, whatever the limit was, and it was printed out. So then did I actually have a benefit? Was it actually helpful to take notes by hand when I could then print out notes that I could use on the exam that basically were the entirety of the exam and just applying those notes to the concepts and the examples and the essays and story questions? Maybe not. But then if the class didn't let us have notes, maybe it would have been useful because it would have been more up in my head. But then again, my normal classes where you can take notes however you want. And then sometimes we have open book exams. Sometimes even for in-person classes, we'll have an online exam, in which case it's open book, open notes. I had a professor who let us actually use AI on our final exam in class. It was an in-class exam, but you could sit there with your computer with ChatGPT open, just asking it any question that you wanted. So the benefit of handwriting notes and not having a distraction from technology for my program is probably very small, if there at all. But if I was 12 years old, the value of taking notes by hand probably would be a lot greater. I would still have some time to improve my handwriting or hopefully have okay handwriting by the time I was 12. I feel like everyone's handwriting is probably getting worse though. That's a fight I think we're going to lose no matter what. So, it's really subjective. And then, if we're having these kids, and this is another component, if we're having these kids go through elementary, middle, and high school, and we're saying you can't have a smartphone with you at any time during the day, just keep it in your locker in case there's a family emergency. Or I've seen some schools make you turn them in. Other schools give you like a bag and you have to put the bag in your locker and your phone's inside of it, whatever it is. And then you get out into the workforce or you go into college, you attend university, and then you can use any digital device you want to take notes. And some of your professors are going to actually let you use digital notes on your exam or actually use AI on your exam. Is it useful to train people to do everything by hand, and then all of a sudden they're in a world where no one uses anything by hand? Is it still useful that they remember things because they wrote it by hand? But then by the time you're 40, are you going to remember stuff that you wrote down by hand when you were 10 years old in elementary school, or 12 years old in middle school, 14 years old in high school? Probably not. So I think what it comes down to, my guess is all the statistics, if you wrap them up together, the benefit of making students up until university, so all the way up until high school, not having devices and writing everything by hand is more of a distraction saver, distraction reducer. And then also, hopefully, the kids are not bullying each other in technology, at least during the school day, because they're not supposed to be using their phones. They're not going to be filming each other. They're not going to be filming teachers and staff in the school. I think overall, it's probably more about distractions rather than people actually learning more or people actually developing skills that will last them the rest of their lives, because all of those people, when they go home, they're going to use their phones. And it's actually going to feel probably stupid to them that they can't use them during the day. So they probably are learning a little bit more in some ways. They probably are going to retain some of that, especially over the short term into university. Um, but mostly that's probably a distraction reducer. Would you agree?
Yeah, so I would say it's definitely helping to reduce the distraction, but then I would also say that maybe the distraction based on like the things that we're seeing in terms of like the reading level and the decrease in like I don't know basic. I don't think the student of today is as advanced as the student of like yesteryears. So maybe there is something to be said about technology isn't as helpful as we think it should be in like the development of learning. Like there must be, I mean, based on what we're seeing, I think there is something to be said that maybe in these like earlier years, it is needed for us to develop without it. Like maybe you don't become, um, how should I say? Maybe you don't become like an Einstein or Isaac Newton or anyone of who excels in like a science or mathematics if you've been using technology the whole time as you progressed.
Yeah, at least starting off with some sort of basis where you're working a little harder. You gotta struggle a bit, at least in the beginning.
Yeah, so because for instance, when you get to it's much easier to how should I say? It's much easier to learn something that we have seen people be able to learn within their later years because like it's very new for all of us to start using AI. So many of us haven't had like so much years of it. But these stuff that we've learned for I guess maybe a third of our lives sometimes or maybe even a quarter of our lives, uh, it seems like it takes that time to learn it. You don't just become you don't just become a physics major uh, by 7 years old. Like
Yeah, unless you're
it takes
that
time to
one
build
guy
upon it.
or one girl you read
Yeah,
about.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
that makes sense. That's like
Rarely.
Australia has banned social media for I think it was around 16 or 17-year-olds, everyone younger than that. The UK has just
Mm,
announced that they're banning social media, I think up into the age of 16, because not only is social media really dangerous and damaging to adults, but at least with adults, you're legally an adult first off, and then
mm,
secondly, you understand that the things that you would have done when you were 15 on Instagram, or the videos you would have created as a 15-year-old on TikTok are probably a little too adventurous than is safe and is good common sense. And probably by the time you're 17, whatever the limit is in Australia and now the UK, you'll be a little better about that. And certainly by 25, 35, and 45, and so on. So yeah, it takes some time to get used to it. One thing though, Trevor,
but
that
the
I
only
would add about the lowered student achievement in the United States, it has been pretty much demonstrated across the board that COVID mostly just robbed every single student of a year of learning, and they're never going to
Yeah.
make that up. And so now that we have COVID kids in university, so it was been 2020. So yeah, now we have several years of students who were in high school who have now gone into college. And from what I understand, it was pretty clear that those students missed an entire year of learning. So that's one thing. Then
Yeah.
secondly, just generally across the board, America is, lowering its standards for reading and science and math and all of the things you were talking about. I've lived most of my life as an adult outside of the United States, and what I can tell you
Okay.
is that education in most of the rest of the developed, rich world countries is funded and thought of very differently. Um, Overall, I would say probably better. It's done better
Yeah.
outside the United States. But we still have some of the best, like, high schools in the entire world. It's just your average high school in the US is probably not as good as your average high school in France or something, right? And I spent a
Yeah.
lot of time in East Asia where students go to school basically all day long and are so stressed out about grades and getting good jobs and getting into a good university. And those kids use technology way more than kids in the United States, and they still have much higher test scores. So
Mm,
could some of the kids in China, South Korea, and Japan, which is mostly considered, East Asia when you hear that term, could they benefit
yeah.
from having their cell phones being taken away during the school day? Probably, because once again, it's about managing distractions, reducing distractions. But what allows them to have such high achievement across the board, particularly in the sciences, so STEM fields, is because of the emphasis, at least my opinion. I'm not an educator, my opinion. The emphasis on education culturally in those countries, the money that is put into education in those countries, the way that they teach kids in those countries, the way that kids are taught to respect not only teachers in those countries, but just people who are older than them. So that gets into the culture of those
Oh,
countries.
yeah.
And if you took American style education and American funded education, the style that we fund or do not fund education, and put it in China, South Korea, or Japan, the students would probably, my guess, still have higher levels of achievement because of all of those other factors that I listed outside of funding, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I do think that's possible, and you're making me think. Is it necessarily like maybe the form of technology or how it's being used versus the technology in itself? Like, could there be something wrong in how we're like applying it, and that's why it's not as effective as one might think it could be? So, in the sense, like if we were implementing AI uh, through schools at a higher level, could there be a better like application that would make it more beneficial, that the like what we're seeing now in terms of performance would actually increase? Like maybe there is
Yeah,
something
you'd assume that
about
there's
certain
always
form.
optimization and greater
Yeah,
efficiency that
exactly.
can be achieved. But once again, just my perspective as someone who grew up in a 900-person town in the Midwest, and going from that, has spent most of my adult life outside of the United States.
Hmm.
Whatever the teaching method is, because there's so many different ways to teach things, and whatever the use of technology is in the classroom or is not in the classroom, what I have seen, the highest achievement, the best students have been because of the culture of the classroom. So
Mm,
what you do when you're told to do it, and how you treat the other students and how you treat the people who are teaching you. And
yeah.
that's not something that's easy to export. Like you can export, you can say, "Oh, we did research at the University of Texas Austin, and this is the most effective way to teach math to children across the board, across cultures, across languages. If you do it this, you have the highest chance of mastery of math for every grade level from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade." I would still rather put my kids, I don't have children, I would still rather put my hypothetical kids in a classroom where they were expected to do their homework, sit still, pay attention, and respect the teacher to the level of absurdity that I saw, at least
Yeah.
in East Asia. And I would focus less
Mm,
on the methods, and I would focus more on the culture of the classroom. It's sort of like, I read recently, when I was growing up, I'm old enough that I remember the dietary guidelines were constantly changing, like avoid fat, avoid this, avoid that. When I was young, we were always told, don't drink whole milk. Like that's the worst sort of thing to
mm.
do. Like you got to drink skim milk. Like don't do that to your body. And now what's happening is everybody's moving back to whole milk, right? So it always shifts. But the thing that I read recently was that it's not actually about a certain type of diet. It's not about avoiding carbs. It's not about avoiding fats. It's not about avoiding trans fats. They found that the healthiest people, it didn't really matter what they ate. It mattered the quality of the food that they consumed. So if you eat a lot of processed
Mm,
foods that's low in fat, it's probably not as good for you as if you ate food that had lots of fat that was much higher quality and probably much more
mm,
expensive, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
I equate that to the classroom. It doesn't necessarily matter what the teaching method is, as long as it's like a good enough teaching method, that's fine. What really matters is the quality of the classroom, so the culture of the classroom, and that could include AI, that could include computers, that could not include computers. I would just say that there needs to be respect and there needs to be accountability, which I saw out the wazoo in East Asia, and I think that we have less and less and less of that in the United States.
Yeah, yeah, I would definitely say in terms of because like when I was going through school, uh, compared to like when I was at home, it was a definite like cultural shock for me because the way how some kids treated the teacher. I mean, I was told to treat the teacher as if that was my parent, um, but other people seemed to treat them as they were nothing. But yeah, so yeah, I would say that definitely does hinder the aspect of learning. But now I kind of want to ask in terms of so let's say for adults then, do you think in the sense of does AI help us like in terms of like gaining knowledge as an adult? Like, do you think with maybe I don't know if it necessarily has to be a cultural aspect, but maybe that does play into it as well. Do you think that there are some maybe societies that would benefit more from AI than others? Like like AI within itself may not be detrimental, but due to the society in which it's being used, it could either be detrimental or beneficial. Do you think that plays a part?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was in the Peace Corps a long time ago, and I was in Latin America, and it was a kind of dangerous and also poor area of the country. And the school that I was a volunteer at, we had a computer lab, but the computers were always not working. And a lot of the times the kids didn't know how to use the programs on the computers. So it kind of felt like more like a computer lab in show. So like, hey, look, we got a computer lab, but it wasn't actually really utilized very well. So there were a lot of things going on. And so I try to imagine like at that school that still exists, but all the kids have graduated. There'd be new kids there. Some of the teachers that I worked with are probably still there. Yeah, in fact, I'm friends with them on Facebook. Some of them are still there. I'm trying to think, and maybe I should reach out to them and ask, actually. That's a really good point. Um, how has AI affected them? Because they still have access to all the same free AI that we have in the United States, right? It's all the same. It would be probably flipped to Spanish, but they have access to all the same tools that you and I have access to. How has that affected them? And like, if you live in like a village in rural Africa, to use that stereotype for a moment, like how does that affect you? So clearly, a lot of the times you'll just have less access to it. But where I was a volunteer, there's probably even more internet than when I was there. When I was there, some kids had internet at home, and the school certainly had tons of really fast free Wi-Fi. Oddly enough, and they had that giant computer lab that was also air conditioned, so it was nice to be in there. I'm not sure how to answer that question because even though I've lived so much of my adult life outside of the United States in many different types of countries and situations, I will always be from a 900 person town in the Midwest in the United States. It's hard to get out of that mindset.
Mm.
So it's a little hard for me to answer that. But I guess one thing I would say is that, like, if you're living in like Philadelphia and you're using AI, it's probably really specific use cases. But if you live in a poor area of Central or South America, I can only imagine the things that you could use AI to do to like improvise things that you can't afford, or if it's like really hot in your house and you don't have air conditioning, like the sort of things. Because one thing I saw all the time when I was in the Peace Corps was that people would make things from hand. Rather, they would make things by hand that would mimic things that they didn't want to buy from the store for some reason because the store was too far away or it was too expensive. So you would see things that were crafted together, like completely 100% by hand. You would see things that were broken that had been fixed several times by hand. So they had to be really good at fixing things. I can only imagine if you have like a broken refrigerator and a phone that can take pictures, what you could accomplish with Chat GPT helping you versus like what I use it for, So in some ways, I think AI actually has so much more promise for people that are from poorer, developing countries, or maybe even live in parts of the world where they don't even have access to smartphones and computers. If someone was living in, gosh, insert really adventurous geographic area with like wild animals and dangerous weather and stuff like that, and maybe somewhere in some building someone has an internet connection with like an old desktop computer. Just imagine, like, okay, like, like some kid has some illness and there's no doctor in the village, but they can describe the illness. Like, just imagine the things that AI could help with in those situations versus I live in Philadelphia and I'm an accountant and I use AI to help me in my job, you know? So in some ways I think AI actually has a lot more promise for people who have a lot less than many people in developed rich countries. And then in other ways, you can also imagine that someone who maybe lives in a village in a rural area of Africa um, has less use for AI because AI does focus so much now on like photo generation and video generation and rewriting essays and emails and stuff like that. So probably both. But I've never actually thought about this until you brought it up. So this is a great question. I think actually AI, just like technology in general, has so much more promise for people who have far less than people who have far more.
Yeah, I'm glad you even came up with that idea of using, because I tend to forget about that, where you can use it, show it something, and it can help you like maybe repair something, or 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 build something, or like you could use it to like, let's say if your bike, you had a flat tire and you don't know how to replace the tire, like you could show it, and it'll like walk you through it. So I think in the sense that almost speaks to the idea of like necessity, is like the best invention, I think they say. Um, so I guess that would, I guess the region in which you're in, or like where you're living, would affect like now the use case that you use it for. So like for instance, I don't know if it's Anthropic, or I kind of want to say it's Anthropic, but maybe it could be OpenAI. But in America here, one of the use cases that they're fighting over, or I think they're trying to avoid, is the military use, and how they want to
Yeah,
use it
the
to.
Trump administration, the U.S. government has been sort of in this tug of war with Anthropic, which makes Claude. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, and using its like predictive nature to be able to like find targets, and Anthropic within itself finds that to be, that could become problematic, because if the AI is now the one that's making the targets and sending the missile like that, it's it, I think within themselves they're saying it's not that advanced yet, to that's not going to become a problem, or it's not going to have an adverse effect. So, but in a village, like for me back home, the use case would never be that. Uh, the use case may really just be, oh, how can I be more efficient in like how I use water or something, or like or like maybe even like watering a plant. Like maybe it could help a person invent something. Like just the other day, I was watching, I think it was like Shark Tank or something, and there's this guy who invented something called like a teepee. I think he calls it teepee tree or something, but it's just like it's almost just like a plastic covering over like a tree around its root, and it helps with like conserving the water that tree gets, and it conserves a lot of water, versus if you don't have it, then a lot of that water is getting like, there's a lot of runover, so a lot of gallons are being wasted. But because of his invention, you can water the same tree with a lot less water. So within things like that, because as I use like AI to help me come up with ideas just for like writing, it could really be used for ideas of like invention, to make one's life easier. So yeah, I think in that sense, it could be very beneficial. But to the aspect of like the military, if you're in a place like that, who I guess there's an abundance of inventions already, it now becomes like maybe a proponent of war versus something that's helping humanity. I mean, which is, I mean, well, maybe that speaks to the greed of us, because why not just use it to help us come up with like cure to cancer or something? But
Well, yeah, that's the great thing with AI is you can use it for just about everything, and it can all be simultaneously done. But yeah, it's interesting. I guess the way to describe it would be that a lot of people who have less would be using AI more for general knowledge search, kind of like an instant encyclopedia, and a more useful way than just searching the internet. Where a lot of people who have more, or governments who have more, are using AI kind of for its actual intelligence, in replacing humans. So that's also another way to look at it. I wanted to bring myself up to date because this has been kind of going back and forth with the US government and Anthropic. So right now I'm on CNBC. Uh, this was about 7 days ago. About 7 days ago, Anthropic announced it had disabled access to its Fable 5 and Mythos 5 artificial intelligence models to comply with an export control directive from the US government that cited national security authorities. The company said it received an order instructing it to suspend all access to the models by any foreign national, whether inside or outside the United States, including foreign national Anthropic employees. Wow, so foreign employees. Anthropic abruptly disabled the models for all its customers in order to ensure compliance, but said all of its other models will not be affected. The unexpected move came just days after Anthropic announced Fable 5 and Mythos 5. So that's, I think with ChatGPT, it's mostly numbers, but I guess they give it weird names like Android, iOS does. Two powerful models the company touted as state of the art across a number of different industry benchmarks. In particular, Fable 5 marked the first time that Anthropic released such an advanced offering to the public, thanks to new safeguards that block responses in specific high-risk areas. So probably if you're asking it how to create bombs or do something terrible. Yeah, this is interesting. So the government told Claude, both for foreigners in the United States and people outside the United States, as well as Anthropic employees, wherever they are, who are not American, should not have access to these really high level models. That's really interesting. So, I know previously there had been something about the government said it wasn't going to use Claude. It was basically like going to ban the use of Claude unless Anthropic did something. I think maybe unless they opened up the models for inspection or use by the government. I can't remember the details. And then I think that was canceled by the courts. But then this is like the update about, we're not saying we're going to use it, but just don't let foreigners use it. So it creates a lot of complicated scenarios. Also, you have DeepSeek. Is it called DeepSeek? I think it's this free to use um, sort of open source AI that's developed by the Chinese government or developed by Chinese companies that's paid for by the government, whatever the situation might be. And I think it's actually banned by the US government. So like American companies cannot use it, but I guess individuals can. So that's a whole other situation that's not included in this article. So it gets really complicated. But again, to compare this to people who have less, they're not worried. People who have less don't need Fable 5 and Mythos 5. They just need some LLM from the last couple of the years to help them with really basic repair or like watering trees more efficiently, stuff like that. So again, it goes to using AI kind of like a search engine. In fact, a lot of people in the United States in the developed world probably use AI just as a really efficient, fast search engine that's easy to talk to, rather than actually using the intelligence features, which gets more into war and stuff like you were talking about. And then finally, just a final thing talking about war, AI is really being used effectively in Ukraine. They are using AI driven, or how do you say, AI assisted drones to just fly into Russian tanks and trucks and bridges. I saw this report. It was a real report. They basically have like um, guns strapped to, I don't know, some sort of metal thing that has wheels or tracks on it, and it has like a speaker on it, and it will like go and attack Russian troops. And I actually watched a real video of Russian troops surrendering to like an AI kill attack vehicle um, that had a speaker on it, so that either the AI could talk or someone could talk over the speaker remotely from like a bunker somewhere. And it's just crazy the developments that are being made every day in the war between Russia and Ukraine, mostly from the Ukrainian side because they have less people and they have less resources. So they have to be kind of cunning in this way. but they really have delayed what could have been Russia forcing them into some sort of armistice by now. And in fact, I read that this is the first time in quite a while that Russia has lost more land in the last however many weeks than they gained. And some of these big swings have been caused by Ukraine's very effective use of AI assisted drones and these kill bots. And so it's like, yeah, using AI for warfare seems pretty scary. But given that Russia invaded Ukraine, um, if Ukraine is using AI to fight back, like, I think that's something most people could probably get behind.
I think depending on depending on how you view it, one person's freedom fighter is another person's rebel soldier. But I think that just highlights how the use case is like very vast because it's able to, I guess, I'm not sure how they exactly implement it, but I would assume, based on like technology I've seen so far, you could have like a camera setup and the predictive analysis can determine whether this is a fighter or a Russian soldier, and now, oh shoot, weapon, and the only thing you're attacking is a gun or whatever the vehicle is, and you don't have to have a actual soldier out on the field. And then in terms of like their drones, um, I think the thing that they wanted to use in the U.S. For Anthropic was, I don't know if it's predictive analysis, but there's, because of like because of the efficiency of AI, where like it can take in a large data set, and from that data set it can make quick calculations and determinations and show patterns. Like you are able to even like see, let's say, enemy routes, or yeah, like enemies can be identified by just being able to tell a pattern of like the movement of like maybe let's say a transport vehicle or even like troops. Uh, so from that point, you can determine where it could be, just by, I guess, running like a number analysis. Uh, so I do think this could now become like a, how should I say? I mean, maybe this could be like the new form of like warfare, where now a lot of decisions are being made by AI, which is kind of scary to me, because if AI becomes a point in, where not only does it give you the analysis, but they use it to be able to just make the decision of like deploying the missile or something, or to actually make the attack, versus having to have a human implement it. Um, I mean, it's more efficient, but uh, I don't know if the analysis will always be correct. Uh, so
Speak of
that
the
is a bit
devil,
scary. But
this is an article from Reuters from June 12th, so about 7-8 days ago. Ukraine's defense AI chief predicts new paradigm of warfare. Warfare in Ukraine and beyond faces a paradigm shift in the coming years as artificial intelligence systems integrate into unified networks that speed up decisions on the battlefield, according to a senior Ukrainian official. Ukraine is in the 5th year fighting a full-scale Russian invasion and is already using AI for a plethora of battlefield functions, from flying drones at targets to helping plan combat operations. Oh yeah, planning. You could just ask ChatGPT, how do we fight the war? And crunching data on Russian missile attacks. AI will form a new paradigm of warfare. It's already actively doing so, said the head of the Defense Ministry's AI Center. He predicts AI systems will eventually be unified into a single network overseeing the battlefield, leading to a war of operating systems. Wow, that's an interesting way of putting it. With Russia in the next 3 to 5 years, if the conflict continues. The center he leads was founded in March as the defense minister seeks to put AI and data-driven decision-making at the heart of Ukraine's defenses, which is smart. If there's any way that they're going to eventually be able to be said to have won this conflict, it's going to be by becoming more efficient and thinking outside of the box. Drones, still mostly flown by pilots, have already upended the way the war is being fought. Ukrainian and Russian troops launched thousands of unmanned aerial vehicles each day at each other. The ability of drones to constantly surveil the battlefield and hit targets with precision has accelerated the kill chain, which is the process of planning and executing a strike on the enemy. But AI decision-making would speed that up even more. And that's all because Ukraine, whose military members are around just 1 million people, is already using AI tools in its command systems. But the goal is to create a single operating system to recommend battlefield decisions all the way up from individual frontline units to strategic command. That would significantly speed up the analysis of data on the 1,200 kilometer front line to allow recommendations to human commanders. So it seems like humans are still almost always in charge of the battlefield in Ukraine, but it's about the recommendations, and it's about very quick, speedy recommendations that eventually the idea is we'll have access to all battlefield data.
Yeah. So yeah, like it's the efficiency, and that's another part that makes me a bit worried. If well, I don't know, maybe it's because sometimes I want to slow it down, but I do kind of think this quest to be as efficient as possible, to output more and more. I don't know if we're like kind of running ourselves into an eventual burnout, or to a point that we won't be able to sustain it ourselves. And because we can't sustain that output, maybe just due to like mental fatigue, or I don't know, just a desire, maybe we now will push to having just AI be able to run all things.
And especially, just like it's always the case with war, in the United States after 9/11, it changed so many things. And I think the idea was at the time was that, like the Patriot Act, we are going to reduce the rights of all US citizens and everybody living here because it's in the name of safety and making sure that 9/11 doesn't happen again. And this is a short-term thing that will go away. But what happens? It's just like with airlines. When I was young, I remember you got 2 checked bags. When I was young and I flew for the first time, every time I flew, I got 2 checked bags and a carry-on included with every ticket price. And that was continental flights. That wasn't international. That was flying in the US. And then that changed, and everything else changed, and everything else changed. And now, when I fly internationally, I fly cheaply, so I'm not going for the high level, ticket. But when I fly internationally now, it almost always, my flight does not include a single checked bag. It's not as bad as like Spirit Airlines where you just have a backpack. I get a carry-on bag, but like I have to pay extra now regularly every time I fly internationally from the US to wherever I'm going to have a single checked bag. And even just a few years ago, I don't remember that being the case. So that's been more of a recent development. I mean, it's been a long time since I got free checked luggage on a flight within the US. That, that ship set sail a long time ago. But I bring all this up because like this is the norm and it's never going to change back. So just like with the Patriot Act and all these other things that we did after 9/11, I think mostly they've kind of remained and they've just become the new norm. So to tie this into AI, when AI is used because Ukraine has less resources and less people and was invaded by Russia, so they have a lot of things working against them. When they rely on AI and drones to try to turn the tide, and let's say they do, uh, that's not a last ditch effort to avoid being completely overtaken by Russia. That's the new paradigm shift. That's the new norm. And so we're never going to go back. And other people, other countries' militaries, whether or not they have to fight a war when they're invaded by Russia, they're going to learn from Ukraine. Nothing like battlefield testing on the actual battlefield. And so is this going to be too much? Like your question, Trevor, are we going to have some burnout? You can imagine that whenever AI works and it just becomes the new norm, that's how we do things. That's how we do things. There's only so far you can go. Now, over the course of like hundreds of years, and that becomes the new norm, you could imagine that just everything is done by AI and we're just kind of around to watch it. That could be the norm. But within our lifetime, to switch everything to AI, that probably will create some AI burnout, aside from like jobs disappearing and having to have universal basic income and things like that we've talked about on the show the last several days. It's just too much too fast. I mean, a lot of people thought the rise of computers and the internet and streaming services and digital technology was too much too fast. I'm from the rural Midwest. A lot of people I know, their parents, they still think that. But just imagine when I'm their age, when I'm 90, I'm probably going to be like, well, AI moved too quickly. I don't know that that's going to happen, but that's probably not the hardest bet to make.
Yeah, I didn't even I didn't even consider that aspect of universal basic income. Like when you guys had spoken about that, is that something that you guys are thinking will be on the onset within, I guess, the next 30 years?
Yeah, it's really hard to do timelines. I'm usually on the side of all of these projections about AI are all wrong. It doesn't mean that they're not eventually going to happen because it's usually a question of when rather than if. But I think the when is actually going to take a lot more time because we're going to have pushback. A lot of companies now that have really embraced AI are finding that it's not like necessarily the wrong move, but it was maybe too much too quickly. Because even if they can replace workers with AI, it creates really toxic atmospheres in the company, and it's just hard to create that culture shift where people are using AI for everything. I've talked to a bunch of business people the last year as an MBA student, and they have told me to the point that I just like couldn't believe them at a certain level how much they use AI, especially consultants, business consultants. They use AI constantly for everything. And I guess it works for them, but I can only imagine, if you like work for Walmart, which Walmart's actually like the largest employer in the United States, apparently, or it's crazy. I can't, because I know Nvidia is like the richest, most valued company now, but I think Walmart's the largest employer. Walmart has some number one thing. I don't know what it is. Um, if they fired a bunch of workers and then replaced them with AI, like even in the store, like if like they had like 50% less people in the store and there were just like robots roaming, this wouldn't happen because the technology and the cost isn't there, but that would be really hard to get used to, right? So for several reasons, including the fact that it's just hard to get used to. I think it's going to take a lot more time than I think almost anybody says nowadays. But to get to your question, the idea of universal basic income is that aside from it being a thing on its own, which is much more of a thing in Europe than it is in the United States, but we talked about universal basic income well before AI in the US as well. Universal basic income for AI is basically that it is predicted that there will be so many people who lose their jobs who cannot be retrained. So they just basically won't have jobs the rest of their lives, or they won't have income at the level that they did previously for the rest of their lives. And going forward, there may be less jobs because AI and robots will be doing everything. This is not what I believe, but this is a sort of a popular idea that we will just have to have a certain amount of the population receiving universal basic income because they won't have jobs, or they won't have enough money from the jobs that they can get. Now, in the US, that's already a thing. We have a lot of poverty in the United States, and that's why universal basic income has been talked about previously. But in the context of AI, it is sort of AI is not going anywhere. You can't stop AI. Even if you regulate it, you're not going to stop it. Even if you heavily regulate it, I should say, you're not going to stop it. So there's going to be some kind of disruption eventually. And if the disruption is large enough, you're going to need something like universal basic income to make up for the more profitable companies, more efficient companies who need less workers. And hence, someone has to pay them. And universal basic income is that sort of solution, if you will. We got a message from Penelope. Let's hear from Penelope.
What is up, gentlemen? Hope you guys are having a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on your time zone. It's your boy Knives, aka Penelope Sparkle Boutte, coming through to wish you some good love, positive vibes. Just saw your show; it seemed interesting. Does AI help or hurt humanity? Honestly, it depends on the individual. Like, hey, absolute power corrupts absolutely, unless you're not a dick. Yep. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. What's good? What we talking about?
I like that. That was really good. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, unless you're not a dick. I've never heard it put that way. It's hard to argue with it, though. We got another message I'll play in a moment, but Trevor, back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with that, but then at the same time, I think within the first part of that, like the former part, I think absolute power, it's kind of hard not to corrupt you. I think I'd be a very different person if I was rich. Does that mean that I'm a bad person already? Maybe, but I think it makes it easier to become corrupted when the power is there. But I would think I'm a nice guy, but maybe I am a dick. But in the sense of with the universal basic income, I think if we do have anything that now makes that a necessity, then I think that thing would be kind of detrimental to society. Like something that makes us have to be in a sense, on a welfare state. Not because it's not universal basic income to say this has to just be the living wage that you must pay someone to do a job. This is saying there's no jobs and we just have to pay people so they can be able to still function and be able to like buy something to eat or live somewhere instead of being on the street. So I think if it does become to a point like that, I do think we have to rethink how we're using AI in its application. Because to completely destroy a workforce simply due to efficiency or are on the premise that this is us becoming more technologically advanced, I think that's a precedent we should not set. I think we should reject that.
Yeah, and then the problem is, even if everybody agrees with you, AI is not something you can really stop. So the EU has already shown that it's regulating AI more than the United States. So let's say the EU regulates AI heavily. So there's not a lot of innovation coming out from the EU. And the US also regulates, or the US doesn't regulate, choose. Because other countries like China, they're not going to regulate AI. So eventually, whatever these other countries do, it doesn't matter because the AI will come from wherever it can, and it will bleed over. So whether or not it's China or the United States decides not to regulate it, like we don't regulate most things in the United States, you can maybe delay it, but you can't really. It's like computers. The computer revolution really did take place in the United States in a lot of ways. Um, but let's say that we had really turned anti-computer for some reason. Maybe the computer revolution would have taken longer to happen, but it would have happened by now somewhere else, right? You can't really delay AI because it's all software. Like, you have to have data centers, you have to have chips that run it and stuff, but we already have infrastructure to run AI. Maybe not the fastest, best AI, but it's code. You can't stop this. So even if I were to agree with you that, oh yeah, just in this hypothetical, we need to stop this because we can't have universal basic income for a sizable amount of people, like we need to protect these jobs, you can't. So you have to do the best that you can. And then on top of that, I would add, in a different way to answer your question, rather your statement, is that, it used to be a really long time ago in American history that the street lamps, the street lights were actual lamps. They ran on like gas. And you had to have somebody that would go there and like light them every evening and then turn them off like in the morning when the sun came back out. That's a whole bunch of jobs that we no longer have. You could imagine that we could have way more jobs in the United States if we outlawed certain types of technology. But like, does that make sense? I'm happy to live in a society where there's a certain level of unemployment, and that could be high, that could be low, in the name of progress. What I think is more important is, does that progress allow us to take care of the people who are left behind? If companies can become more efficient and therefore the American economy grows and you have more tax revenue, or we even increase taxes, we're probably not going to because it's the United States, but let's say we do, then you could in theory pay for a universal basic income. The problem would be, we have to have universal basic income for millions of people who've lost their jobs to AI in some theoretical future, and we can't pay for it. That would be an actual problem. But if we can pay for it and if it's worth it, that's fine. I'm at the age where I have a lot of friends who have had kids in the last 10 years. And I've really enjoyed talking to my friends about financial considerations when they have children, because everyone I know has been like, we did the calculations and we thought, what if one of us stays home rather than pay for daycare? Because daycare is so expensive in the United States now. And I've been fascinated by the calculations that they ran, because usually it turns out that it's better financially for the couple if they both work and they send their kid to daycare. But then it's like, well, if one of us stays home, maybe we'll have slightly less money, but we also don't have to work and then spend that money on daycare. So you would get to stay home and not have to have the job, which some people might enjoy. Some people might drive them crazy, but okay. So it's not just money for money. It's, well, I'm not actually working. I'm spending more time with my child. My child is not off with some stranger that I don't know what's going to be going on. And, you could imagine maybe you trade off. Maybe I don't work for a year, you don't work for a year, imagining that you could make that work. So it actually becomes kind of like a break in a way. So it's not just about money, it's about all the different considerations and whether or not they decide to have one parent stay home or have them both work. It's more than just a straight money consideration. It's about quality of life and it's all of these other things that are important in that decision. So I'm not against universal basic income. I'm not against much higher unemployment, just as long as it works and it can make sense. If it can't, then yeah, I don't know what we do, but we should do something. I don't know what the answer is, but I just want to point out I think there's a lot at play more than just universal basic income and a high unemployment rate. I'm going to have to end the show here eventually just because I am running on fumes, but I want to play all of these messages that we're getting. I want to give, I'm sorry, Trevor, go on.
No, I was just laughing when you said I'm running off fumes. Yeah, it is pretty late.
It's getting late, but I want to give Trevor, I want to give you some time to reply, but let's try to push through some of these messages if we can. And then I'll give you a time to give some thoughts, and then I'll wrap up the show. I really appreciate everybody joining us. Trevor, I hope you can join me again. It's been a pleasure. I have followed you over on Stereo. I'm doing these shows all the way through the summer on AI. I'm an MBA student. I'm going to apply for a PhD in the fall in something business and AI related. So I just want to have these conversations with people. What do you think about AI? Do you like AI? Do you fear AI? How do you use AI? How do you not use AI? No answer is wrong. It's all interesting. I'm glass is half full on AI. I think it has so many benefits, but I've had to challenge some of my thoughts and my opinions and beliefs based on the conversations I've had with awesome people the last couple of weeks. Let's hear again from Penelope.
Chance, I absolutely agree with you on that. That's absolutely the way that the smart people are going to go about it. But you got to remember, it's like 10% smart, 10% dumb, and then 80% in the middle. And that in the middle part, like, that's us. We're going to use it for fucking porn and video games. So I think we're fine. I don't think we have to worry about Skynet yet. Also, when you speak of the robots that might come from like AI and, come to take jobs, are we talking Asimov robots or are we talking Masamune robots? Like, I mean, because if we got like 3 laws, iRobot type shit, we might have a chance, but if we got like Ghost in the Shell shit, we're fucked. Like, everything's done.
Really quickly, because I am running on fumes, but they did some studies around the world to kind of talk about the trolley thought process experiment. Have you heard about this? It's where you're the trolley operator and there's you're on a single track, and then you can either go left or right. The track splits, and on the left there's a bunch of like young people you're going to kill, and on the right there's a bunch of old people you're going to kill. And then there's different numbers. You can have the trolley situation, just insert any sort of interesting people there, and you have to decide who you're going to kill and who's going to live. And then they unveil afterwards, oh, you saved all the young people, but it turns out they all have terminal cancer. So it's just like, test your assumptions. But they used this experiment and they tested people in countries all over the world. And they said, if you were driving and you had to kill a young person or you had to kill an old person, who would you kill and why? And a lot of Western countries chose the old person. We erred on the side of this person has had a life and we should let the young person live. But a lot of Asian countries, particularly East Asian countries, they said, oh no, kill the young person and let the old person live. And as someone who spent a lot of time in East Asia myself, I took that as in East Asia, old people have a ton of respect that we don't often give them in the West. And I saw that as we usually respect older people more in our culture, so we should save them. The reason I bring this up is because the idea of the 3 rules for robots, like don't harm people and all that stuff, Waymo and other self-driving vehicles, like the self-driving Tesla autonomous ability that you have. I think if you own a Tesla, you can turn it on, but you have to still sit in the driver's side seat as a backup in case something goes wrong. You have to program these autonomous vehicles to understand the trolley situation. So if they're driving and they have to swerve because there's an accident and they're going to kill one person or they're going to kill another person, who do they decide to kill? And if you're a Waymo, which is a taxi, basically, it's a rideshare service, but there's no driver. Do you err on the side of saving pedestrians and not hitting them? Or do you err on the side of saving the passenger who's paying you to drive them somewhere? And you can look this up. Some companies choose the passenger, some companies choose the pedestrian. And legally, there's nothing I'm aware of that says one of them is right or wrong. It's just a choice you have to make. So we're sort of encountering those rules of robotics before we actually have robots that would, match an Isaac Asimov novel or something. So it's sort of filtering in. But then the way that I describe how this is actually not as big of a problem as people think it is that this is not new. This is nothing that I've mentioned is new. It's not new at all. And how could that possibly be? Because human drivers have to do that today. When I am driving, I have to decide at a split moment, am I going to hit a young person or an old person in that situation? In less than a second, I have to decide, am I going to try to not kill people by hitting them with my car, or am I going to try to save myself and run a bunch of people over? All of this is the same thing that AI is now having to encounter in self-driving autonomous vehicle technology. The decisions may be different than the decisions you would make or I would make, or maybe they're the same, but they're still decisions that you and I have always had to make. And so this is something that really bothers me. And I'm not calling anybody out here on the show, but this is just one of my pet peeves, is when people point something out about AI and they say, oh, isn't this terrible? And I usually take a moment, I take a pause, and I say, how is this new? You do this, I do this. This is not new. You are getting upset about nothing that matters and nothing has changed. The only thing that would matter would be that if some company did something weird that we all thought was immoral or could actually be illegal. But out of all the situations that we described, I don't think anything choice-wise would ever be legally something you'd have to worry about. Because if it's a split-second decision and you have no good options, I don't know that legally it's worse to hit a child or hit an old person, right? So as long as legality is thrown out the window, it's all just interesting conversation, but it's nothing that anybody has to actually worry about. Sorry for that short. I guess it wasn't short, but I wanted to jump in with that. Let's hear more from Penelope.
Dude, if AI and robots wipe out the whole job force the way you're saying, there's only one of two ways that this goes for like humanity as a whole. Like, we're either getting like extreme communism, like 1984 style. Like, I mean, we got to keep the population alive somehow. So I guess we just got to share shit and all be on the same level. Or, and this one fucking sucks. Like, we're gonna have to have a purge. We're gonna have to have a purge every year to, like, have the population eliminate the undesirables themselves. Like, dude, all this shit is so dystopian. I don't like it. See, this is the problem with being a huge fucking nerd and keeping up with like sci-fi and anime and all this dystopian future shit. And like, I see the benefit of it, but also Terminator. Like, I can't get that out of my head. And here's how nerdy I'm getting with it after all the undesirables are gone. Like, We're just gonna have a bunch of fat people that can't stand up on their own on fucking hover shit in space with robots. It's gonna be Wall-E. Like we getting back to Disney Pixar with the shit. It's dude, like we have to stop these robots. We have to stop this AI shit. All right, we good where we are. Full stop. Done. Yes, I'm absolutely familiar with the Charlie problem, Chance, and it always bothered me that like I couldn't solve it. But then I realized there was just like you take a knife and you tie it to a long stick and you stick it out so you can get the one person, and then you run over the other three people, effectively getting all four of them. Science. Also, that's sarcasm. Yeah, I'm not that crazy. Anyway, y'all have a good night. Be safe, be blessed, be humble, be as awesome as you always are. Penelope Sparkle Booty out this bitch. Ciao.
Thanks for all the messages, Penelope. It was great hearing from you. And I got to say, I've never heard that response before. You hit one group and then tie a big stick with a knife on the end, so you take out the other group as well. That would be the thing that we would have to be worried about if that's what Waymo or some autonomous vehicle technology was like. We're going to try to slide the vehicle so we can clip the first group with the front tires and the second group with the back tires. That's what you'd have to worry about. But if it's just picking one or the other, it's interesting to discuss if that's the right decision, but it's still the decision we all make, right? So once again, it's not a big deal. So, there are a lot of problems with AI today, and there are a lot of problems with AI that are going to pop up. But let's focus on the problems that are actually new and different, and then also look at it holistically. Is this actually a problem if we have a ton of benefits that outweigh this problem? I think that's the way AI is going to be implemented. Maybe life will be less interesting because everything will be automated. But if you grow up that way, you don't know any difference. So maybe it'll just be less interesting for the people who know what it used to be like until we all die out. But if the benefits far outweigh the drawbacks, like I welcome our robot overlords. I really do. AI is better than we are in so many things in 2026. Just imagine how much better it's going to be than us in so many things in 2027, 2028, 2048, 2076. I'm excited by this. I think we should all be excited by this. It doesn't mean that we put on the blinders. It doesn't mean that we forget about humanity. But I'm so frustrated by all the fear. And once again, I'm not calling out anybody in any specific conversation, but just especially as a journalist, I've worked as an audio journalist for a very long time, and journalists are so afraid of AI. I'm an MBA student now, and so I'm not actively producing journalism, but the journalism I've done in the last several years before I went back to school and started my MBA, it was better, it was faster, it was more accurate, and to be honest, it was more enjoyable using AI because I was able to focus on the things that I liked doing. And even if they were things that AI could do, I would do them because I liked doing them. And I would use the AI to do all the boring stuff that I didn't care about, that had to be done and had to be good and had to be accurate and factual. But I could farm that out to AI and then make sure that it was all those things while I could focus on the other things. AI makes me a better journalist. It makes my journalism better. Maybe that's not always the case, but I found that to be the case always on my end of things. So, maybe I'm just self-selecting for all my positive AI experiences. But once again, I'll have some fun with it. I welcome our robot overlords. I really think it's going to be good for the vast majority of us, and the people it won't be good for. There's never always winners. The computer revolution was not good for everybody. The internet revolution was not good for everybody. The YouTube revolution was not good for everybody, namely a lot of journalists. But as someone who has a lot less opportunities now than I did 15 years ago working in journalism, I'm still glad it happened. I think YouTube is great. I think podcasts are great. There's more to listen and watch to as a person than there ever was before. And I'm willing to take a hit to my industry to make that possible. Okay, Trevor, back to you, friend. Really appreciate you staying with me this whole time. Why don't you close this out and then we'll end the show.
All right. Yeah. I really appreciate the Wally callback. He didn't even know it. I do think it's a bit pessimistic, maybe even cynical in a way, to completely think Skynet. But at the same time, it's not like a delusional opinion to have, because the implications of what AI could be, if it does become like how we said her, where they're able to completely think on its own, there is a chance that maybe it could delve into that. Now, for me, to touch on the universal basic income thing, like you said, when we decided to move away from the workers who were lighting up the lampshades because we had electricity now and we no longer needed that, there was still like an avenue for them to go. And I think that's what we have to still have. Even like when automation came, as I touched on, like the factory workers, a lot of like factory workers lost their jobs, but there was like retraining into new fields, and there was also new fields that they could go into. The problem with, I think, AI could become, if it does become robotic, so it's not just software, but there's actual practical hardware applications. So now it can actually do jobs that we do today. Uh, if we don't have an avenue for people to go into, I would say I'm not as trusting of a capitalist society to completely say that we'll go to a welfare state and everyone will just be okay with that. I'm not exactly sure if greed won't win. Like as Penelope said, absolute power corrupts. I do think there is a chance for corruption in that. So I do think we do need to have retraining, or we do need to come up with new ideas of jobs for people to have, so that the basis of people being able to have income isn't set on the precipice that we'll have a bunch of revenue coming from AI, and that revenue will be divided equally, because who's going to divide it? I mean, welfare is okay, but it's not a perfect system. So I'm not sure if we should just go boldly into the night of AI and say, yeah, there's no safeguards needed.
Yeah, all good thoughts, all good things I agree with. Let's wrap up. We'll just play one more message from Penelope.
Okay, I know I left and I apologize for lying to you, but no, bro, like, yes, AI and our robot overlords are better than us. That's the problem, man. Like, I want to at least have a chance in, like, the freaking apocalypse of the earth. Right? I mean, we all know it's the big four. No, I'm sorry, the big five. It's zombie apocalypse, alien invasion, nuclear fallout, Jesus rapture bullshit, and AI taking over. And it's just zombies and Jesus. That's the only ones that I really gotta. The other three, no, I can't do nuclear fallout. I can't do aliens. They know more than me, and so does AI. I don't want to be fucked. I want to have a chance.
That's a really good personality test. Which 5 of these would you take? Yeah, I would take aliens. I would take zombie. I'm not a religious person, so that one doesn't interest me. Um, AI, I would take. Yeah, if AI took over, as long as it didn't turn into a nuclear apocalypse, if AI just took over and they were our overlords, I once
I would
again,
like to
these are
say
like
I'm
end of
going to take
world
human.
scenarios. So I'm sorry, Trevor.
Yeah, I want to take the option where humans are still trying their best to be to run the world in a good way for humanity. So let's go with that option instead of being a slave to Skynet.
Well, yeah, I guess the sixth one would be just a World War III that was a conventional war, so it's not nuclear, but they're still fighting because these are all end of the sort of civilization scenarios. So yeah, there's probably a good side in a World War III, and so all right, maybe we'll take that one. All right, big thanks to everybody. My fumes are gone. I'm not even running on fumes anymore, so I have to shut down the show, unfortunately. But Trevor, if you want to stay in the room and keep running, that's totally okay, and I wish you best if you want to do that. If not, no worries, and I hope you guys can all join me in the future. Big thanks to everybody. Check out all my links. I'm on More Than Just Stereo, and well, where are you? Here's where I am.
This is Chance Encounters live AI conversations. Visit tr.ee/Chance Encounters for links to our live YouTube video stream, Buy Me a Coffee listener support, and X Spaces audio simulcast to call into the show live. Those and all other links at tr.ee/Chance Encounters.